So welcome. I'm so glad that you all have joined us today. This has been a day that I've had a special star on.
Oh my goodness.
Because I have been really looking forward to talking to Pastor Cheryl, who is a pastor here on our staff at Shoreline, but has many other kind of side interests that make
Side
her
hustles.
make her life especially interesting. And I just want to introduce, some of you may know her because you're from the Austin area or you're part of the recovery community. So she is a recognizable face in that regard. But I want to just say this much about her. I happen to be doing a Bible study right now where we're talking about, or in the context of the study, we're talking about the fruit of the Spirit and the gifts of the Spirit. Mm-hmm. And actually the point the guy was making today was that just because you have the gifts of the Spirit doesn't necessarily mean that God's always happy with you. In fact, sometimes people put too much emphasis on the gifts and not enough on the fruit.
Sure.
But when the gifts and the fruit of the Spirit are together in the same person, it is super powerful. Mm. And I have always felt like every time I've heard you speak, even before I was on staff, just kind of knowing you a little bit from afar, you are one of those people who, when you walk up on a platform or you're just in a circle of people, whether it's our staff or a group of volunteers, you exude integrity.
Wow, thank you.
And I love being around you because that's what I want to be when I grow up. I want to be one of those people. And so, you know, as we were talking and getting ready for this podcast, I told you that a passion of mine increasingly is about helping the strong stay strong. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to presume that I know what that means. I want to talk to people who I have seen in the journey stay strong over the long haul, not necessarily perfectly, and not that they, kind of making themselves feel good by being all that. I mean, it's just people who I've watched who have been in the battle, on the front lines, for the sake of the kingdom, and doing it with joy, integrity, love, and you have definitely been that. So
thank you.
Thank you so much for making time for this podcast. So
you're welcome.
For those who may not know you, tell us a little bit about yourself, like where you grew up, kind of about your family, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So my name is Cheryl Luke, and I am from El Paso, Texas. I was actually born in White Sands, New Mexico. I don't know if you've ever been to the White Sands in New Mexico,
nice.
But my father was in the military, and was stationed in New Mexico. And very soon after I was born, we transferred to El Paso, and that's where I was raised. I lived there for 20 years, and
siblings.
I have 3 siblings, and I'm the baby.
Really?
Yes. My eldest brother was adopted from Kwajalein, overseas when my parents were overseas. My father did a stint overseas, and I have a brother who's second in line, and then my sister is just before me, and a house full of laughter all the time and antics and great food and trips. And I have to say that even though my childhood was riddled with some pain, because my father left when we were younger, I look back and I wouldn't want things to be any different. I loved the way my parents raised us. I loved the laughter that filled our home. Now that I'm on the other side of it, I appreciate the way my mother, the way she raised us in terms of, her rules and her hand of iron when she needed to use it. Being the youngest, I was wise because I watched my brothers and sisters get in trouble all the time, and I was wise.
Yes,
I kept my mouth shut.
You let them pay your dumb tax.
I kept my mouth shut. But I had a great childhood, and it wasn't a childhood I didn't have a silver spoon in my mouth. We didn't have much at all. But the one thing that I can look back and thank God for was His presence in our lives.
Oh, that's great.
My mother knew the Lord, and she raised us with a healthy fear of who He is and the knowledge of His working power, and I got to see it firsthand.
So did you, like, if you were to describe your spiritual journey, would you say that you've kind of always had an awareness of God and then it kind of gradually became personal, or was there like a crisis moment where it was
There was no crisis moment. There's been a lot of crises in my life, but I do think that I was able to I caught a lot because my mother was a woman of prayer. She was a woman of faith. She walked what she talked and brought us along the journey. And if we didn't understand, we had the freedom to ask. If we didn't believe, she set the table for conversation. And
I love that.
So we still had to abide by her rules. We had to go to church. We had to participate in church. But she really was, and I don't see that practiced as much today. But the way she raised us in terms of our Christian experience was unmatched, I would say.
Wow, what a beautiful way to describe that.
Yeah.
And so then were you kind of, would you say, positively inclined for the most part, or did you have like a season of rebellion, or?
I was positively inclined, and I have never had an open season of rebellion, but there were times when I thought, is this real?
Yeah.
But I never walked away.
Okay.
Never walked away.
And did you have a sense that you would be going into ministry?
Not at all. I
Oh,
never
really?
had a desire.
Oh, wow, okay.
Never had a desire. She was in ministry. I would say that she was a missionary to our city in El Paso, and she was known as Mama Luke. And we'd come home from school, and you never knew who would be sitting on our couch. It would be a pastor from across town. It would be someone who was a city official or someone off the street.
Wow.
And while I really appreciated her the call on her life, I thought that I would be the one funding the ministry.
Okay.
You know, I wanted to be a hairstylist. I wanted to own salons and boutiques and coffee shops was my desire. And I ended up going to school at Oral Roberts University and working here at Shoreline. And I wouldn't have it any other way. I wouldn't have it any other way.
So I because that is a pretty significant transition,
It's a
thinking
massive.
about coffee shops and salons
Yes.
and going to Shoreline.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's a really long story too, but
Yep.
if you could just kind of say, what were some of the key movements in that
I would call them
direction?
detours. I would totally call them detours. I think one of the key...
Facebook just crashed. Sorry, I'm so sorry.
That's
No.
okay.
Okay, and it's completely down.
Well, let's keep recording for
Okay.
the
Yep.
other.
Sorry.
Keep going.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say one of the biggest transitions that moved me here, I was dating someone and we got married and it didn't work out. And I was working in El Paso and decided that I probably should move because my environment, my health, my mental health was not in a good place. And I had a friend that lived here and came to visit her for Thanksgiving, and decided while I was here that I needed to be here, and went home over the Christmas holiday and got rid of all my things and moved
Wow.
at the beginning of the year. And that was almost
Wow.
30 years ago.
And were you familiar with Shoreline already, or
No,
How did that?
we had phone books back then.
You are showing your age.
We had phone books back then,
No,
and
tell me
I
better.
pulled out the phone book and I wanted to find a good church. And Shoreline was the third church that I found. It was actually the first church, but it said, we used to be called Christian Faith Center, and our tagline was the Oasis of Love. And I thought, that's probably, and I was 30 years younger, that's probably an older white man and his wife who probably has long hair. And that's just in my mind what I was thinking. But every week, for 3 weeks, I'd just be drawn to Shoreline. And that third week, I thought, I'm going to go check that church out. And fell in love immediately.
Huh.
And never turned back.
Wow. Well, you have had not only, it sounds like you were very much touched by the experience, but you have now had, over these 30 years, a real impact on the experience. And so thank you for your investment here.
You're welcome.
And, so often people see, and I'm not proud of this fact, but you can probably have seen it too, where a lot of people see ministries as stepping stones to something else.
Right.
And that's okay.
It is.
Sometimes people have to do that, and God calls them. I'll believe in that. But to see somebody say, I am going to plant myself in a place, because when you are in a place for a long time, I was in Missouri for 22 years, And when you're that long at a place, you see a lot of things. Some things are really great, but some things are not all that great, both in terms of what they see about you and then what you experience.
That's good.
But to be able to stick it out and work through the challenges that are associated with the long-term ministry, man, that's pretty incredible. So thank you for your investment.
Very welcome.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about your heart for ministry. What drives you in ministry? And I know it's probably changed over the years, but if you were to kind of put a couple of pinpoints and say, it's really for me about X, Y, and Z, what would those be?
I think if I were to think about the overarching, line of my life, I would say, and this is probably not very holy, but music. I love music, and I always have loved music, and I love how music has affected the lives of people and how...
I would not have expected you to say that.
Music.
I would have thought of a lot of things.
Yeah,
but
music.
Wow, okay.
I appreciate the fact that music sets a tone and how you couple the Word of God with music and how it impacts people's lives in a moment. I can't put words to that. And then secondly, and I don't know really if these are in order, but music is really up there. But people is the other piece. I think that I love people. I love how different we are. I appreciate what we all bring to the table and how the way you're designed, and myself, the way I'm designed, and Stacy, who's on the other side of the camera, the way she's designed, how we can all come together and bring our genius together and create a movement that affects people's lives and add music to that, and affects people's lives for eternity. And so, and then those who are on the other side of our genius, if you will, who are broken or hurting, we have something to offer. And it's not, I wouldn't say it's based solely on what I bring to the table, but what I bring to the table points back to my Creator. And it's all about Him. It always points back to Him, but what He's given me to give to other people is critical. And
it's unique.
It's so unique. And to have the opportunity to affect someone's life, I don't know. And then again, add music to that.
I don't know that I've said it this way or thought about it this way before, but when you talk about music in the way you just did, I think about some of the people that I have related to over the years who have trouble. One of their sticking points is, I just don't feel God. I just don't have, I can get there through the apologetic theological argument and say, okay, yes, something's behind creation, Jesus and his, the historicity of his life and the teachings and all that. They can get there from the intellectual side, but emotively, they have a hard time feeling God or sensing His presence. But in music, if you're open to it, the Holy Spirit uses music in a way that's so powerful and so rich. And I do think that's part of why we sing so often in church.
Right.
It just connects it to us at a soul level.
Yes. I was listening to a podcast, and they were talking about an event that happened, and the individual was talking about how the music sometimes is very flowery, and they weren't necessarily moved by that. But the more I thought about that in our environment, because we operate in a multicultural environment, I can sing a song that I'm not necessarily attracted to musically, but if I pay attention to the words and really lean into what the song means, it does something for me. So I think that there is a power in music that we can tend to overlook emotionally and
underestimate.
And totally underestimate. Emotionally and spiritually.
I agree. Wow, thanks for that. That was one of those little rabbit trails.
There you go. You're welcome. That's free.
I love it. Okay, so I want to kind of transition a little bit to what it seems to me, at least in this season of your life, what you are giving a good portion of your heart to, which is the recovery community. I'm guessing that it's an outgrowth of your value of people that you were talking about just a moment ago. But is there something specific that happened in your own life that moved you in that direction?
Yes.
Okay. Would you mind talking about that?
Yes. We have a friend. I don't know if you know Anastasia Lee Hall.
Oh, yeah. Sure.
Anastasia Hall was on staff here, and she was the person that oversaw recovery here at Shoreline, and she moved. And honestly, Pastor Rob asked me to take over Celebrate Recovery, and I knew nothing about it. And I thought that I could help those poor people. And I keep saying that. I thought I could help those poor people recover from whatever they were going through. And decided that I needed to, and I had no idea the process at the time. But as I dug into the program, I realized that in order for me to lead this, I needed to go through a step study. And when I went through the step study, which is you go through the 12 steps over an 8 or 12 month period, I realized that Celebrate Recovery wasn't just for people who have addictions to chemicals or drugs or even sex. It is for people who have problems. And I didn't realize that, I realized very quickly in that step study that I had an issue with control. And I wanted things done my way. And I think that control affects all of our lives in one way or another. But from a personal perspective, I realized that I wanted things done my way. And one of the first steps says, realize I am not God. And that very simple statement wrecked me. When I said I'd been involved in the ministry for a while, but when I read that from a step study in my 12-step mind, I was wrecked. I was wrecked for several months. And so that's the first part that really helped me realize that that ministry is something that ordinary people need.
We are one of those poor little people.
I am one of those poor little people. I can help those poor people. This poor person needed some help.
I can so relate. Oh my God.
But then we were hosting an event, and I think you were at that event. I think you addressed the crowd that weekend. And Pastor John Baker, it was their second or third time in our environment, and we were in the room. I was checking on them to make sure that they were okay, and he looked at me and said, God has big plans for you, young lady. And soon after, he invited me to participate on their team, not walking away from my job here at Shoreline, but to take on the responsibility of ensuring that people of color know that Celebrate Recovery is an environment where we can find healing. And it has been one of those, it has turned out to be one of those things that I didn't know I needed or ever wanted to do. And it's something that I will do for the rest of my life. For the rest of my life. And I'm grateful that I've had the opportunity in this house to do this and to Celebrate Recovery.
I love that. And it's been a tough year for you in terms of the Celebrate Recovery community. Cause
it
John's,
has been.
Yeah.
It has been. But I have to say thank you. Thank you. That man, I don't have the words to describe how impactful he has been in my life. But if you think about the reach of Celebrate Recovery, it's been around for about 30 years. They have affected 30,000 people, 30,000 churches around the world, and over 5 million lives. And when you walk in and participate with them on an intimate level, they don't look like or act like they've made such inroads. They're just like you and I. And I think for me that is it was a drawing factor for me. You don't know.
Right.
You don't know that they've done that. And then on top of that, Pastor Johnny Baker, who has taken over the ministry, has stepped into that seat and taken that seat over. And we didn't feel impact. We miss Pastor John, but Johnny just stepped into that role because Pastor John prepared him. And there has been no bump in the road. You know, I'm sure there's things that keep him up at night, you know, but we don't feel it.
That's so good.
We don't feel it.
Wow.
He's a powerful leader.
All right, so I want to dive a little bit into this whole movement from your perspective, because you know, you look at the culture and you look at the world and you see a lot of things going on, and for many people, the way out of the heartache and hardship of life is to move to destructive personal habits. The typical things like drugs, alcohol, sex, but even things like what you were talking about, control and codependency and all those things. So it would seem to me that what we see happening in the world makes what you do all the more important and all the more needful. Have you seen a recognition in like the world that you're living in where people see that, or is there still kind of the stereotypical, oh, that's not for me?
Yeah. I would say that you see there's both sides of that coin. I think that people have become familiar with the, we call them hurts, habits, and hang-ups that have been a part of their lives. And so in this season, I think those habits and hurts and the outgrowth of those things have amplified a little bit, but it still is familiar. I think there's a level of uncomfortability that people are experiencing, but it's the area that they've been walking in. And I think it takes, and I can say that from personal experience. Yeah. But I think it takes either a crisis or a conversation or realize I'm not God, a statement that makes you sit back and go, I'm a wreck. I'm a hot mess, and not in a good way, and I need something more. And what I've done doesn't work. So I think in some cases you realize it, and a lot of people don't know what to do because it's the way they've been living their lives their entire life. And then
even often patterned in lives before them.
Absolutely.
Right? You know? So,
and then others, I think, don't really realize it until they have an aha moment. I could be wrong.
No, I that resonates with me as well. Yeah. So when you're like helping this community, and maybe also it's relevant in terms of individual lives, but what do you find yourself saying often in light of this reality to people?
I find myself saying that in terms of the work, I say this is probably the hardest work you'll ever do in your life, but it is the best thing, one of the best things you can do for yourself, because you will be a different person on the other side. It will affect yourself. It will affect your family. It has the potential to affect your community. It has the potential to affect the generations for eternity. And when you're looking at, I think when you're looking at an individual's looking at their lives, it can be overwhelming because they see how deep they're in whatever it is they're in, and it feels like there's no way out. And what I love about the 12 steps, it's one step at a time. It's one step at a time, one day at a time, one moment at a time. And when you look at it in terms of it being a process and understanding that you'll take some steps back, but you definitely will take steps forward. If you think about it in terms of the fact that you're not doing it alone, you're doing it with community, it is doable. It's doable.
Yeah, and I think that last part is the key, of course, right? It's the work, the willingness to do the work, but that you're doing it in
community.
In community.
If I can say, I am doing a step study, leading a step study right now with a group of women online, and at the very beginning of our step study, this journey, we all talked about our lives and some of the things that we've been through, and some of those stories were really, really heavy. But today, we don't know each other. We're from different parts of the country. I can't imagine doing my life without these women. And we know things about each other that probably nobody else knows. You know? I cannot imagine doing life without them.
Yeah, and if there's been a common theme in these conversations that I've had with people, I don't, Stacy, you could probably help me with this, but I don't think there has been one where we haven't brought up community as one of the things that helps keep people strong.
Sure.
And, things that you hear regularly from people from all walks of life, all different backgrounds, and they keep saying the same thing, it's like, we probably ought to do that.
Yes.
We probably ought to arrange our life so that we have some community in it. And maybe that's part of what you're going to say in my next question, which is for yourself personally. I like I said at the beginning, you to me are such an example of a gifted, mature leader who's staying strong over the long haul. And I know that doesn't happen by accident. That doesn't just come because you're around a church or because you've been in ministry a while. There are things you have to be doing on a regular personal basis in order to sustain the strength. And I'm just curious if you'll be open and willing enough to talk a little bit about some of those practices or some of those things that you find yourself coming back to that helps you maintain the strength.
Well, I would say it's a couple of things. I do have, for myself and the way I'm wired, I have to, and this may be for everyone, but I have to have a daily time with the Lord. And routine is important to me. And if I fall out of routine, it seems to affect my entire world. So one of the things I do every morning is I get up and I put my earbuds in and I go through the Bible chronologically. And I learn better by listening versus reading. And so I listen to the Word every day. I go through that chronological Bible and just hearing those stories over and over again and thinking about remembering how God brought his people through and remembering that his promises are yes and amen and remembering that the name of the Lord is a strong tower and the righteous run into it and are safe, and remembering that when I fall that he's with me, remembering that when I lay down I sleep in peace because the Lord provides a safe place. Remembering those things is important to me, because left to myself I'm a wreck, and left to myself I try to control everything. And when I control everything, things fall apart. So that's the first thing. The second thing is music. I have to have music in my life. And so I listen to music mostly every day. I journal every day. I talk to my family every day. And at this point of my life, I'm grateful that I'm leading a step study, because I need the women in my life who are part of that step study. I need to go through and answer those questions and share them with my group. And there's no what we call crosstalk. So I just have the freedom to throw out whatever I wrote down, and I'm not going to hear anything back from anybody. But I know that they're praying for me. I know. But I know they're praying for me. They're praying for me. And then community. I want to talk about how powerful community is and how desperate I am for community. I have people in this area, in the Austin area, that I do life with and have done life with for years. But recently I've joined with a group called Campwell, and the leader of that organization has done a phenomenal job of keeping that leadership intact. And so we have a text stream that we pray for one another. We joke about each other, and we get together twice a year in Colorado, and we have the opportunity to lead other women towards freedom and cheer them on in their desires and goals in life. We do that twice a year. And then my Celebrate Recovery family, I'm on the executive team with Celebrate Recovery, and we meet every week and we pray for one another. And when we get together in person, it is unlike anything I've ever experienced. And again, these people are from different parts of the country. And so to have that, what I would call koinonia, that fellowship that is so God-breathed, and there's no time that really is missed, even though you haven't seen each other, that can't be beat. And I have to also mention my family. My sister and my nephew and my brother and his family and my great nieces and nephews mean the world to me. And having being in relationship with them, and it's not always easy, but knowing that they're there, and Thanksgiving is coming, and I can't wait because our house is going to be loud, and we're going to play games, and we're going to hang out all day.
I love it.
Those things are important. That's part of routine for me, and there's nothing like gathering every week and worshiping in your house.
Yeah.
There's nothing like that.
I love it. You know, you mentioned a couple things that I want to just kind of circle back to because you kind of went over them pretty quickly, but knowing you probably have a lot of depth with that as well. When you talk about routines, for example, I think you started with that routines are important to you. I know there's probably a personality thing about that too.
Sure.
Like some of us tend to be more comfortable in routines. But I do think that there's something beyond personality about routines that are really important. And I'm curious how you discovered the value of routines. Like, what was it that kind of got you to this place where you said, boy, you know, I really do every day? You know, was it the School of Hard Knocks, or was there something that happened that helped you kind of stick with a routine?
It took a long time. I'll say many years.
Okay.
And I've always found myself going back to writing a to-do list. And in my mind, through the years, that is not how I thought I liked to operate, because I'm also very spontaneous in some ways. And so that side of me thinks writing a to-do list is ridiculous because I'll remember or I won't. It's not important. You know what I mean? But one of the things, I think through the years, I began to see that was important to me. But doing the Enneagram and doing that Enneagram work, and I know a lot of people are not that excited about personality tests and things like that, but understanding that I'm a 1 and understanding that I have perfectionistic tendencies, which for me goes back to control.
Yeah.
Understanding that I tend to procrastinate, knowing that I have routine is good for me. When I get up in the morning, the first thing I need to do is put those earbuds on, because if I don't, they're not going in. They're not going to go in. And it creates a system for me that sets my day in order. And without that, I can tell, and I hope I'm answering your question.
Yes, absolutely. Totally.
If I don't do that over time, I can see my room isn't as nice as I like it. When I walk in my room, which is my sanctuary at home, it doesn't feel right. I don't cook as often. I don't have that time with my sister and friends that I like, because I'm out of my routine. And I'm not robotic, but I definitely stick to it as best I can.
I so relate to that, and I've come to it late in life too, because I'm a J on the Myers-Briggs.
Yes.
So the J tends to be more structured and
Yes.
enjoys routine. But I've always felt like I wanted to have fun too.
Yes.
And so I thought, no, you can't be too routine because you'll never have fun. But what I've learned is if I can structure my life such then and get the important things done, I have more time for fun.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
So it's just like, yes, the routines, they set you up for the things that you really want to do.
Right. I agree.
The other thing, you've talked about this now several times, and I didn't prepare you for this question,
Okay.
so if you need to think about it, that's fine. But you've brought up music a couple times, and is there a kind of music that speaks to you in a more powerful way than other music?
This isn't holy, but R&B music is my jam.
Okay.
And I think I would say, because when we were growing up, we always had music in our home. And it was Aretha, it was the OJs, it was, Gladys Knight. And on Saturday mornings, music would be blaring through our house, and we'd do our chores, and music would be on. And then we transitioned to the Jesus movement, and I was part of a church where gospel music was central, and James Cleveland and Andre Crouch, and those influences have shaped my life. And now you look at the people, the young guys from Maverick City, Dante Bowe and Chandler Moore, really take me back. When I hear Chandler Moore, I think about the music from the 70s, the Maranatha movement. I don't know if you remember that. But the music from the 70s, and I think this to me is it feels like that, but what this young man has done, he has taken his roots in gospel music, and I could be way off. He's taken his roots in gospel music, and has married that with what I would call mainstream CCM, and has created a sound that we haven't heard, and a movement that we haven't seen. And my mother would say, that boy has been here before. He's been here before. And I love how he has an ability to capture an audience that is multicultural.
Yeah.
I appreciate how he has taken his cues from the past and can sit in a song and sing it over and over until, as my grandmother would say, it gets in your gizzard. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I really appreciate what he's doing with music right now, and how he's impacting, I could say this generation, but I have to say the generations.
Yeah.
The generations. He is a gift.
Well, I love how you answered that question, because I think that and I'd love to hear your perspective on this. I think that one of the things that I've watched happen is that people in the industry seem to, two things. One, there seems to be more songs that are to God, that are like less performance and more about, hey, would you join me as I worship?
Yeah.
Which I think has a very unique appeal. But then secondly, the marrying of different genre, style, the mix of, which I think creates this really unique vibe that is fresh and new and captivating.
Yes.
And so I love, and we weren't planning on going there,
Right.
but I
We
loved
did.
it.
We went there.
I love it. And the reason I think it's important is because I think people, when they hear you talk about like music, I think for a lot of us, there's this like resonance of like, I know when I'm in the right place musically, but I just don't know where to go. I don't know what to look for.
Right.
So you kind of opened us up a little bit to another idea. All right. I always close kind of with the same question, which is, sometimes you're in the middle of an interview and there's been something that in the back of your mind that, oh man, I hope I get a chance to talk about that somewhere. So I want to give you the last word. Is there anything that kind of been like that you've either want to revisit or kind of close out our time with?
Yeah, I think that I would like to land on the fact that we're all different. And I think God created us. Before we talked, you talked about how you have felt different before we started our podcast. And I think that can be said of every individual. And I believe we spend so much time trying to emulate other people or emulate movements or emulating things that would be foreign to us because it's not who God created us to be. And if I could leave with anything, I would just say, know that God created you specifically for a purpose, and that is just to be who you are. And when we say, God created you for a purpose, a lot of people tend to think, well, what is my purpose? And I would say your purpose is being you, and your purpose is affecting the world around you, raising your children, going to your job, and doing the thing that you're supposed to do as unto the Lord. So that is giving it your best and making sure you're loving your neighbor. And in light of COVID and politics and church, love your neighbor. Love your neighbor. We're more alike than we are different. And if we would, which in some ways goes against what I say, but we're alike because we're created in His image. Yeah. And each of us, in my mind, reflect a different part of God's character. And so in that sense, we're different, but it also points to the fact that we're alike. And let's just love one another, and let's celebrate being who God created us to be. Oh.
This was perfect. You always have like these images of what the interview is going to be like, and it's like, oh, this was better. This was better.
Good. Good.
Thank you so much,
You're very
Pastor
welcome.
Cheryl. This has been a delight. I hope that we can do this again.
Yeah.
I think we've only,
Me too.
just scratched the surface
Yeah.
a little bit. So, and thank you for joining us. Thank you for Stacy helping us through the technical glitches, whatever happened.
Good.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us. God
Thanks,
bless you
guys.
guys. See you next time.